It's so nice to be back. I am very excited today to introduce you to my guest, Rebekah Hope. Thank you for being with us, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
It's heading into winter. We've just been chatting about the weather, and I must admit, as usual, I'm a little cold. I'm always a little cold these days. With that said, I would like us to get right to finding out a little bit more about Rebecca before we dive into our conversation. So, how about you give us a little update about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so talking about the snow, I grew up in Michigan where we used to shovel our way out of the house every winter morning. Also, I grew up on a dairy farm. So, yes, in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. I grew up Amish. My parents, my family, they're still Amish. I am not. I left about 12 years ago. And when I left, I moved to Minnesota, which wasn't much warmer than
Oh,
Michigan.
gosh.
Still a lot of snow.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, I moved to Tennessee, and the first thing my dad said was, "You just couldn't handle the cold anymore, could you?" Uh, to that, I would say, "Dad, I have not been able to stand the cold for 20 years." So, and it's one of the main reasons I moved here, was because of the cold. I have never really cared for it. As we were talking off camera, if it could snow just on Christmas Day, like,
Mm.
that would be perfect. Have a white Christmas and then go back to the 50s like we have today. So, that would be good. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Oh, I really like that. And something I just want to I want to mention because it's interesting that I find is there a dialect that goes with being Amish?
So, yes, I would say a German dialect. Uh,
Thing.
I did not learn English until I went to school. I grew up our spoken language is what they call Pennsylvania Dutch,
Yes.
and then everything relating to their religion was in High German. So I learned to speak some High German, spoken language was Pennsylvania Dutch, and then I learned English when I was 6 years old and started going to school.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's very interesting to me. That's not something that people talk about, but I think I come from Scotland. My father, who is going on 90, still has an accent like he got off the boat yesterday. I went to school in Canada from kindergarten on, so I sound Canadian, although Canadians say I say certain things a little differently. But I always found I have an ear for accents because I'm so used to them. And I know a number of Amish people, but from different areas.
Yeah.
And I thought it's interesting because to me, there's always that accent. Like I have friends that are South African, and I know a South African accent, and I know a German accent and the French accent.
So
But
would you I have one?
an Amish accent, absolutely.
Really? I have tried so hard to get rid of that.
Oh no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I when I first left, I was made fun of it a lot because I spoke very broken English. Ha German and English, their sentences are very backwards. So,
Yes.
I used to not say the sentences in a proper way because it was so backwards. English was so
Right.
backwards. So, because I was made fun of a lot for that, I tried so
Oh.
to get rid of it.
Oh, that
It didn't
that's
bother me
awful to me.
though. It's
Yeah,
been
that's really awful to me because I think I love the lilt of the different accents, and in fact, the German accent is much more guttural. It is a much more staccato language than a lot of languages. It doesn't flow, but I think the Pennsylvania Dutch lends that lilt to the High German that you use. So I it's just me, but I think it's very pretty.
why, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have definitely learned to embrace my Amish upbringing instead of
Good.
hiding it, which I used to hide it pretty well. I had friends for years that didn't even know I grew up Amish because that's how much I hid it. But I have a few years ago, it started when I published my book in 2019 about my life growing up Amish, where I started embracing that, where I'm like, "You know what? This is a part of me, and if I deny that, then I'm denying a part of myself." The reality of it is that's always gonna be a part of me, whether I am still living it or not, so I definitely
Absolutely. And I think we'll talk about your experiences growing up Amish, but I firmly believe that all of the pieces of us, all of the familial pieces, all of the different traditions and dialects and what have you are all a part of us. And we can only fully be who we are when we embrace all those parts.
yes. That is now what I stand for, that's what I do in my life coaching
Yeah,
because I found it for myself, and that's why I became super passionate about helping others find that for themselves as well.
yeah,
Very much so.
that's absolutely beautiful. So, with that said, let's dive into the meat of why we're here today.
Let's do
And
it.
you can choose to start your story wherever you'd like.
I know your platform is a lot on suicide prevention and people of stories about maybe having attempted or know somebody who did. Just upfront, I am a two-time suicide survivor. Suicidal ideation started for me when I was around 8 years old. That's the early memory I have of it, and I just remember finding my escape, looking out the bedroom window, just visualizing myself jumping off of my dad's silo and thinking that it would look like an accident, therefore, nobody could call me a coward or ending my life kinda thing, but that is where my thoughts went. That's very much where I found my escape, just seeing it as an option if I needed to. And even though that's where I found comfort, it was an escape for me, there was
Sure.
also a part of me that just felt like something wasn't right about it. I would make comments about, "You guys would be better off without me," or just subtle comments to my siblings, or I think even to my mom sometimes, and the response was always like, "Well, you're crazy to even say that, like, why would you even say that? And that's you shouldn't say that." It was very dismissive and very much left me feeling like I was crazy for even saying that,
Mm.
I do believe was also part of why I'm going, "So this isn't normal. It isn't not everybody has this." So, when I was 17 years old, I chose to leave the Amish. I chose to no longer live within the Amish religion. And because of the way I was raised, I was educated in a way that how would I say it? It was intentional to keep me within the Amish community, and that's the only place I am able to survive. That was the intention of my entire childhood education. So, as you can imagine, a 17-year-old who was already suicidal, very much lost, trapped in an eating disorder, leaving everyone she knew, you can probably imagine how that went as far as being able to even survive. But I will say I had a very resilient spirit, and I remember the morning that I left, it was a cold February morning, and again, Michigan, snowy, it was cold. I just remember thinking, "If this is the end, then so be it," because I would rather die than live in this one more day. I just couldn't because of things that were going on in the home, the perceptions I had of what my family thought about me and the community at large. I didn't really have any friends. There was a lot of abuse going on in the home and just different things like that, that all contributed to this. So when I left, again, that meant I was shunned. My family disowned me, and again, the education part, I had no tools. I had no means of this is how you survive outside the Amish communities. It definitely took a lot of resilience, a lot of courage for me to survive that. But it was trying to remember the exact date. I just know it was the following year. So a little over a year after I had left the Amish that I had my first attempt. And again, trying to be creative where I wanted to make it look like an accident. And I just remember being in the hospital bed and I was just so mad because I realized that I had survived it. And to give you a little bit of a visual, I ran my car off the road. I was going around 80 miles an hour in an area. It was a country road where the speed limit was 45 going around a curve, and I just made a sharp right into the ditch, and I had actually seen a tree, and I thought I was gonna hit it, and long story short, I survived it, but the car rolled lengthwise and then rolled 3 times over the other side, and if you look at the car today, I don't know how I survived. It was yeah, I shouldn't have survived that. But I did, and I remember coming out of that going, "There's gotta be a bigger purpose to my life than this, because I just can't keep going like this, thinking there's no purpose to my being here." I really truly believed I was a mistake because from a very young age, I also believed that my parents wanted me to be a boy. They expected me to be a boy, and again, backstory on the Amish, my dad bought a 100-acre dairy farm 5 months before I was born, so my mom was already pregnant with me, and they already had 3 girls.
Oh,
I am I am the 4th of 8 kids, and now if that's true or not, whether they really wanted me to be a boy or not, or expected me to be, I have never asked them that. That is just what I perceived growing up and how I felt. So, again, I was the wrong gender, and then I was I was an outcast. I was the black sheep of the family, and now I am not even in the family anymore. So what really purpose do I have to be here? That's what it gotten to. And I remember it was one night, and I should also reference I am a born again follower of Jesus Christ. I found Jesus when it was shortly after I had left the Amish actually, before this happened, which also I think contributed to my anger on why I survived because I was like, "Lord, why would you let me live if I have to suffer?" So now I was blaming God for this. But 10 years later, I do know that it wasn't God saved me, but he didn't create me to be on this earth just to suffer. I know that for a fact now because I found my purpose and my calling. But at that time, I very much did not know what that was. I didn't Again, didn't have that community, didn't have that support. I didn't have anybody to lead me or just show me the way. So, yeah, that's
it's a lot for you to go through as a child, even before we get to your teen years, to be 8 years old and to already be burdened by feeling that you don't belong and feeling that they would have preferred you to be a different gender. That's an awful lot of stuff to put on a child. Now, whether they did put it on you or you put it on you, it really doesn't matter at this point. The fact is, you were shouldering that burden, and that is much too much for a child. The fact that it took a year after you left the community for you to get to a place where you thought it best just to exit, I want to say that speaks to your resilience. And wow, that takes a lot. I grew up with suicidal ideation since I was 5, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's important, I think, for us to note that it seems suicidal ideation in very young people, even though you're looking to exit, it's always in a way that leaves people feeling grief, but not feeling responsible for
Yes.
it, which
Yeah.
is really interesting because when we are so inward turned, we're wanting to do what we think is best for those around us. And it's never leaving them with pain. The unfortunate thing is, if we do pass, we are leaving them all with pain. And I think that's an important distinction because if somebody in our audience thinks that those around you would be better off without you, we are here to tell you that's not true. It's
Absolutely.
absolutely not true, no matter what you think, no matter what has happened. And something, Rebecca, that you said that I think I mirror, we don't know exactly what those around us, be they our family members, our friends, if we've never asked them, we cannot assume what they think or how they feel. And I don't want this to sound mean, but it's a conceit on our part that we know. And that's a human feeling. We can't help but feel that way.
Yeah, and if I could even just speak to that for a
Yes.
second here, again, I think it was very cultural for me, where we did not have those conversations. We didn't really talk. So for me to even ask them if they "Is this your intent?" We did not have those conversations. I do remember because when I was 16, I ran away from home, and then they brought me back because I was still underage, and my parents had that authority. So, when I came back, my dad, like, he sat down and he told me, "If you ever want to talk, I don't care if it's 2 in the morning, we are here. Your
Wow.
mom and I, we are here, and we want you to talk. We wanna talk to you." But then on the flip side of that, they never created that safe space for a teenager to talk to them. I didn't trust my parents. I really didn't. I did not feel safe with them. I remember I know I was over 21. I just remember I was of age until when I had that first moment of actually being able to face my dad, look him in the eyes without being scared, like, without being completely terrified, and even then, it terrified me, but it did something for me where it gave me that sliver of, I'm getting back my control, my voice, like, I'm taking back that control because my dad had that control over me for a very long time, even after I left the Amish. It's interesting how you can leave something like that, but you continue in those ways. And those people still have that control over you, which is very much what I dealt with because I didn't understand how those things will follow you.
Yeah. It's funny how it can take the strangest things for us to realize how deeply our upbringing is embedded in us. The strangest things set that off. There's no rhyme or reason, but our childhoods, what we learn in childhood, the tenets we learn, the fear we learn,
Yeah.
whether rightly or wrongly, that stays with us forever. And in my case, my mother used the phrase, wait until your father comes home.
Mm,
That was, to me, the kiss of death.
I remember that. I
Yeah.
can definitely relate to that.
Well,
Yeah.
as an adult, okay, the worst thing that ever happened, my father threw his glasses against the wall My father never laid a hand on any of us. There's only two of us, but that was not my father's way. But my mother knew that the threat was enough to make me believe because of how it was said. The funny thing was, she would talk about he would lose his job because he was in the military and he would have to have his glasses replaced. It doesn't even make sense now as an adult. So what? He broke his glasses.
Yeah.
No, she had me believing that the colonel of the base would be notified that my father had to get new glasses because of me.
Sure, and those patterns of thinking,
Yeah.
I the more because I studied psychology for a little bit and I got a diploma in mental health, like, I've gotten the educational part of it, plus the personal experience of just, like, how you develop the thought patterns. And that it's never placed upon a child to make sure that they think properly. It's something that's ingrained in them by association.
Yeah.
And back to the reference I made earlier about, like, why was I thinking the way I was thinking? It had to do with how I perceived the people around me and what was placed upon me, what you were referencing as far as your mom talking to you. So the things that I heard, the things that I was told led me to believe that I was not wanted, led me to believe that I was a mistake and that I was the wrong gender and that I was better off if I wouldn't be there. And the only reason they wanted me there was because there were a lot of chores to do and they needed me to do those chores. I that was just I took great pride in my physical abilities simply because of that, and I spent my entire childhood and teenage years doing what I thought boys would do as far as working in the field with my dad and just proving to him that it did not matter if I wore a dress or pants, that I could do what he needed done. Yet it was just, like, never quite enough, but what I wanted to reference there is it does not matter how much people get you to believe that you shouldn't be here or you're not you're a mistake. It is simply not true. You might feel that way, and we can validate that feeling, but then we need to dive into why do you feel that way because that feeling can change, and it's a lie that you're believing that you shouldn't be on this earth. That was I was deceived into believing that because of how I perceive my surroundings and the people in my life. So I just really felt that in my
That
heart to reference that.
that is such an important point. Thank you for taking it that much farther. I really appreciate that. It's it is so critical that we understand all those pieces because being brought up in different religions to whatever extent is a form of indoctrination.
Absolutely.
And I believe that being Amish, there is uh, a wider net cast in making one Amish than making one a Christian or a Catholic. I was brought up Catholic. It did not, it was not all encompassing. It wasn't the umbrella over all we did. I didn't do things a certain way because I was Catholic. It is different if you're Mennonite or you're Amish. Your ways of doing things are related to being Amish.
Well, everything revolves around their religion. That's the core
Exactly.
of their lifestyle. So, absolutely.
Exactly. And that's a really important distinction because I'm going to ask a question simply out of complete ignorance. But
Absolutely.
I understood as teenagers, you had, what is it, Rumspringa?
Rumspringa, yeah. So that's sorry, did you have a question along that?
I just because you left at 17, did you not have that option? Or
Okay, yeah. So that is probably the number one question I get is, "Okay, so did you leave during Rumspringa or what is that even?" Some people don't even know what Rumspringa is. And for those who don't, Rumspringa is a time in a teenager's life where parents simply close their eyes, turn their back, and allow their child to explore the world without consequences. They can drive a car, they can have all of the modern day technology, and the reason for that is they believe that if they allow their child to get that out of their system, they will then want to come back and settle down as an Amish, realizing that the world is not the way. The Amish are the only way. For my community, we were not allowed that simply because my parents, the specific community, because there's different communities, different types of Amish, my community thought that would be giving your child a one-way ticket to hell. That is in
Yes.
literal form, that is what they thought. So, we did not have that option. Therefore, there was no way out. But an interesting factor about that is those who do have the privilege of going through Rumspringa, a larger percentage of those actually come back, yeah, than those who leave and never come back. So I found that super interesting when I was doing that research.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that because that was my question. Um, a long time ago, I researched that. I had done some work with an Amish community, and I was just really fascinated by the whole concept. It's a tiny relation to this, but when I was 12 years old, my parents sat me down, and my father said, "We want to talk to you about smoking. Okay, we don't want you to smoke. We don't think it's a good thing." And this is way, way back when. So it wasn't even considered really a bad thing yet. But my father said, "I cannot, in all good conscience, tell you not to smoke because I do. I only ask, your mother and I want you to ask our permission first. We would like to know if you plan to smoke." And it was the best psychology anyone could have used because it was like, okay, I don't need to do that. It was the permission was all that was required for me not to do that. And the not doing it was my own choice.
Mhm.
But had they simply said, we don't want you to smoke, I
You
think
would've
as a teenager, I would have felt hell bent on, then I'm going to smoke. So I thought of Rumspringa as that, okay, we'll take the brakes off, we'll let you do whatever, and you'll come to your senses pretty quickly. And yeah, the numbers for me were borne out because there are more who come back. I didn't realize there were communities where that was not available.
the interesting part of that is I didn't even know Rumspringa existed until after I left the
Oh,
Army.
wow.
Yeah, because naturally, you meet other ex-Amish and you connect because, "Oh, you grew up the way I did, okay." You get to talking and I'm like, "What do you mean Rumspringa? You mean your parents allowed you to do that? And they let you park your vehicle on their property?" That was just bizarre to me. I couldn't even get the concept of it at first because I
Wow.
just I actually didn't believe that at first because it was so foreign to me. I've now met a lot of people who actually they left during Rumspringa and never went back, but it was also through those conversations that I searched, deeper and did some more research and realized that there is a larger percentage who end up going back than those who never have it, leave, and definitely don't wanna go back like myself. So, it's, that's interesting how parenting is yeah, I'm not a parent, so I,
Fun.
speak to that, but I can see how the psychology part of it that you were speaking about,
Yeah.
that I definitely see that.
Well, and the fact is, as a parent and a grandparent, I now understand we don't come with a handbook. parents only do what they know or what they've seen. And it makes it very hard for people who have grown up in an abusive situation because, in all likelihood, the parents came from an abusive association. And it's part of the human condition. If all you know is abuse,
Mhm.
that to you is love.
Oh,
And that
I yeah.
and that is what you search for, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you know. On the other side, if you grow up in a loving household, then it's a little easier to try and be loving to your children. But still, they don't come with a handbook. And
We'll still
we
test
all yeah, we all have different personalities, and it can be challenging to bring up children.
yeah.
We don't, one of my guests said, "We don't come with a handbook for our brain. This is something that every child should be taught to utilize, and we don't. You need to get a license for a bicycle or a dog or a cat,
But not a
but there
child.
is no requirements to drive your brain, which is the most powerful computer on earth," which is mind blowing when you think of it.
Yeah,
And
and I do know that has a lot to do with it's definitely a big contributing factor in me being able to give my parents grace in the way
yes,
they raised me because in their defense, that truly is all they knew, and
yeah,
from what I have seen, I do believe they grew up even stricter than I did.
yeah,
Because they didn't even have the technology part where they could
mhm,
access it, like, it wasn't available to the world
yeah,
versus just not available to the Amish community. Now, if I was caught with a cell phone, there were consequences, but in their age, like, they weren't even available for them
yeah,
to go find. So, it was even easier for their parents to have that authority
control.
when this is the way we live, you gotta put up with it, or this is just normal, as you said. And it's also interesting how speaking to that, it was quite a few years after I left until I actually admitted that there was abuse in the home because I was simply with the belief that it wasn't abuse because I was told it's not abuse. I was groomed to believe this is normal and this is discipline. And if your dad beats you up, it's because you did something to deserve it. Even if he didn't explain what that was, you just knew that there was something you did wrong and next time do better. Like that was, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I think it was the first time I actually am going, "Wait a minute, maybe that was abuse," was when I went to see a doctor about some physical pain that I have been experiencing for years, and when it came down to it, they actually wanted to call authorities on my parents. But I was already of age, and I was thinking of my siblings who are not, and I'm going yeah, I had to convince them not to. Anyway, what I was trying to say is the doctor told me it was abuse
yeah,
because I have, uh, permanent damage to my body because of it. And when you are in physical pain and you feel that pain every single day, at some point, you gotta come to the conclusion that maybe it wasn't right. Maybe it wasn't
yes.
okay. And that it took a doctor to tell me that in order for me to even go, yeah, I think what my parents did was abuse.
Yeah, yeah, and that is completely understandable when you are in a closed community because you can only know what you live. You can only know what's around you, and it makes it very hard for people in closed communities in whatever step you may be to understand where that line is, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, or what is the norm
Okay.
in a society that is respectful to others' persons is different from my time to yours. And it's
Absolutely.
different from my time to my parents' time.
Mhm.
And my father used to talk about his grandmother, and I'm sorry, I don't know if it maternal or paternal, but she would take turns boxing the boys' ears and telling them that was for nothing. Just imagine what you'll get for something. And I used to think, come on, you're making that up. But he wasn't. It was considered she was an elder and she would make them toe the line. Whether they were good, bad, or indifferent kids didn't matter, which to me is quite odd.
Mhm.
I know my grandmother never would have thought of doing that. But as Maya Angelou said, as we know better, we do better.
Mhm.
And I believe that, or I choose to believe that even close that as times change and children are more inquisitive, are growing up in front of our eyes faster than ever before. And the fact is, I hate to bring this down to monkeys, but they say a monkey learned to peel a banana or a fruit or whatever when they lived on an island. And after that, within the next generation, all the monkeys everywhere know how to do that.
Yeah.
And they were never shown that. It's it becomes a generational thing.
Absolutely.
Most of the children, like you talked about having a cell phone. Or if I had a cell phone when I was a kid, somebody would have locked me up because
Yeah.
they didn't exist.
Yeah.
Barely the phone on the wall existed. But it's really interesting to me that when my nephew's son, who is now 15, when he was here, he was, I think, 18 months old, and he went into our family room and he was trying to make the pictures move on the television because his father had an iPad and you could move things on the iPad. But he intrinsically just knew it's so I should just do this. It was fascinating to watch. Granted, my TV didn't do that because it wasn't
Yeah.
hard, but to be able to pick that up and to extrapolate that from one thing at 18 months of age, like our humans are
We're very
jump
smart.
ahead by leaps, yeah, by leaps and bounds. What that brings me to is how do we work on that normalization of the conversation around suicide, around ideation, around mental health, which in closed societies and even in open, we do not talk about. And that's why we're left with all this stigma and shame and the constant silence around people who have taken their own lives.
Yeah, it is. I definitely chose a very hard topic because the stigma around it just in the world at large,
Yeah.
but then to the extreme in my culture, it's really just not what you do. You just don't talk about things like that. It again going this might have not just been in the Amish community if you go back far enough in age is you're just either crazy or you're normal. And you some people call it the nut house, like, whatever, I don't know if I can say that on here,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
yeah,
No, you go right ahead.
like, just nobody wants to go there because those people are crazy, and I've been in a mental institution. I'm not crazy. I know I'm not. Do I have challenges? Yes. Mental health, it's the exact same as physical health. We need to talk about it, not to say that when you are when you have a mental illness, that is okay. No, it's recognizing that the issue at hand so we can fix it. Just if you have cancer, you can't just say, okay, now it's okay and normal to have cancer.
No.
No, you're gonna die. Like you need to deal with it. I've been diagnosed with different things that I do believe that I have had. I still very much struggle with PTSD.
Yeah.
I do not deny that. But it's when you talk about normalizing these conversations, it's your perception about it that will allow you to do it's not somebody who is mentally challenged or yeah, I'm gonna label it as such. Somebody who's mentally challenged, they're not crazy. There is an issue that needs to be dealt with because you would never look at somebody who has cancer and go, they're crazy. Ever. I mean, if you do, then there's other conversations that need to be had.
Yeah.
But I think you get my point. It is something that more people struggle with it than we realize simply because we have not allowed those safe places for the conversations to be had. So that the two main things that I do with my life coaching is one, suicide prevention. Helping people recognize certain things so that they don't go into the idea of the only escape from this pain is ending my life. And then on the flip side of that, people who have no clue, maybe the people who think that you're crazy or you're normal, educating them on mental health, suicide prevention, what would lead somebody to do that, and the signs that you can be looking for. I was the perfect example of that. I It took me years actually for me to tell my sister. I have one sister who left the Amish as well. And before I say this, I just want to say we are really close today. Like we have a really good relationship and I am forever grateful that I have one blood sister that I can say that about. But when I first attempted, it took me a few years to even tell her that it was an attempt. And she her first response was actually, "Wow, I actually thought that was cowardly." And was I taken aback? Absolutely. But you know what it did? It brought awareness to me that she doesn't know. She truly doesn't know. And you know why she doesn't know? Because I didn't tell her. I didn't tell her how I was feeling. Is she responsible to make that safe place for me to talk about it? Yeah, to a certain extent. But I'm also responsible to talk to her about it because how else is she going to know about it? So it's everyone taking responsibility for their own actions. Those who don't struggle with it, how they can create a safe space for those who do struggle with it, that we can work together and one isn't better than the other. That was the biggest thing when I got out of the hospital was they actually came and interviewed me and they're like, because of the feedback I was giving them, they wanted to know what they are doing wrong because I saw so many things wrong that just really but we when I left, they wanted an interview on my feedback, and I said, "You know what? If I were to leave you with one thing, I would tell you that there cannot be a gap between a police officer showing up on" for example, that's how I was hospitalized, like, I am the example of police officers showing up on scene because they thought I was going to take my life, and I will tell you that I very much felt like they thought they were here and I was not even here. You know what I mean? There cannot be a gap between those 2, and for there to not be a gap between those 2, there needs to be education. And they even in the interview, they even asked me, they're like, "So are you saying, like, people who struggle with mental health are, like, more educated than those who are trying to help them?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"You know what? I don't know if I'd use education, but they're further advanced because they're trying to tell you what they need, and you're looking at them like, we got to put them on meds because we can't handle their emotions right now. It's not going to fix anything at all. So, got off on a rant a little bit there, but
No, you got off on the perfect rant.
gosh, as you can tell.
Yes. Okay, because you are singing my song. Okay, my song is about first responders and all that deal with mental health issues and suicide and ideation. You have to immerse yourself first. And I firmly believe that surgeons need to be put in hospital for 48 hours and have the residents work on them the way they do on a patient, because patients are not sides of beef. For first responders that deal with mental health issues, you need to spend 24 to 48 hours in a mental health facility so you can understand how it feels and understand life from the other side of what it feels like to be looked at. Sorry to say it this way, but as a lab rat,
Mhm.
okay? Because very often policemen are there to help and they want to help, but their fear of what they don't know takes over. And you can't know what you have not experienced. I don't care how smart you are. So that's been my lifelong dream, if you will, is to have everyone who says they want to be helpful, then fine, put yourself in their place. And once you've experienced that, you will have a completely different view.
Exactly. Because if we are going to bring the suicide rate to zero, which is my goal, bring the suicide rate to zero, one life at a time, we have to believe that there is no difference between, I'm just going to use the example we were using, a police officer and somebody who's about to end their life. Here's why: because there is no difference. At
Mm.
the core, we are both human, we bleed red, and we have a heart that beats.
And at some point, that person who wants to take their life could, in fact, be a police officer.
And vice versa.
That's
There's
right.
that's why there's, and the second that we have the perception, that anybody has the perception that there is a difference between those two people, that is adding to the problem, not the solution, because then we live on a false perception that we're not both human, who bleed red and beat the same heartbeat. Like, this just
And part of that is where we are right now. And this is why I keep talking about normalizing conversation. Because even in the stats we have, which this year are particularly horrific, we have passed the 1 million mark in suicide this year. Our initial approximation for this year was 800,000. We are almost a quarter more. Okay, so 25% more in this year, which is horrific. All of that to say those stats aren't correct because we have children. And the fact is, children as young as 8. But quite often, the coroner, the parents, the family, they don't want it recorded as such. And they don't tell the authorities that's what happened. Also, that happens in older people as well. And what about all of those that don't have a lot of people around them? We don't know. So we don't even have the appropriate stat. The reason for that is because we don't talk about it. And talking about it, getting rid of that stigma, the silence, and the shame, that is my mission to help everyone who's in the suicide prevention game because we do want to get suicide to zero. Because every single human.
Exactly. Yep. And if I didn't believe that was possible, I would have never made that my mission. My number one mission, bring the suicide rate to zero, one life at a time. And that is why I also my motto of what I live by is always choose love because yes, it is the ultimate sacrifice, but it's because there truly is hope for all. There really truly is hope for all. And if we start with always choosing love in whatever we do, there's not going to be any room for hate and stigma and all those things that are really just absence of love. Very much.
Rebecca, this has been a truly wonderful conversation with you because it is all about hope. It, with you, is all about love, which I think is wonderful. And the hope that we can take away from this conversation just to change one life means the world. We will have all of the information for you to be able to get a hold of Rebecca. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. I look forward to hopefully having another conversation with you because I don't think we're done.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're done. So I'm very much
No.
looking forward to that. And I just want to say thank you for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to paying it forward.
That makes two of us. So, as I said, you'll be able to find all you need about Rebecca down below. And on that note, I'll say to each and every one of you, make the very best of your today, every day. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you for being here for another inspiring episode of Suicide Zen Forgiveness. We appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe and download on your favorite service and check out SZF's YouTube channel or Facebook community. If you have the chance to leave a 5-star rating or review, it'd be greatly appreciated. Please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from the hope and inspiration from our guests. Suicide Zen Forgiveness was brought to you by the following sponsors. Truel Social Media, the digital integration specialists. Let them get you rockin' page 1 in the search results. Canada's keynote humorist Judy Croon, motivational speaker, comedian, author, and stand-up coach at Second City, Judy has been involved for over a decade in the City Street Outreach Program in Toronto.
The ultimate podcasting pack. This is great for you if you're just starting your podcast or if you've been running it for a while. It's filled with tools, templates, and trainings for starting, growing, and monetizing your podcast. Get access to time-saving systems and strategies for accelerating your process at each step. Find new connections and collaborations in the uplifting podcasting community. I look forward to seeing you there.
Do you have a story to share? Do you know someone you think would be a great guest? Please go to szf42.com. And for our American listeners, that's szf42.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again.